Hey, Connect Groups, we're back once again with Pastor John. Week 10 already of Sermon on the Mount. We're flying through this second week of Matthew chapter 6.
Yes.
And John, we're talking about prayer. Now, as you were preaching, I was thinking prayer is one of the spiritual disciplines that in theory is the easiest to do. We just speak, right? Speak to the Lord.
Yes.
But in application,
really hard.
Prayer is very difficult.
Very much
but
so.
One thing that as Jesus commands us to do, as he's teaching the Lord's Prayer, he says when you pray.
Yeah,
it's not if, it's actually a command that we are to be in relationship with God.
Right.
As we start our conversation around the Lord's Prayer specifically, and maybe just prayer as a larger topic, can you speak to this? Why is it so hard sometimes to pray? Because like we're talking right now back and forth.
Yes, we are.
Right? We're in community with one another discussing. Yeah. It's the same application as when we talk to Jesus, but why is it so much harder to talk to the Lord versus, John, good to see you?
Yeah, well, I think there's probably three reasons. Number one, a lot of people think it has to be a certain way. So I addressed this in last week's sermon, right? That it has to be flowery or significant, or you have to say all these profound things. So there are certain people who feel blocked, and actually certain individuals just aren't good with words.
Sure.
Like, we might be fine talking, but someone else might be like, and that's about it, right?
Yes.
So there's the expectation that's a problem. Number two, sometimes we're good with words, but we don't know what to say. And number three, it's hard when he's not in the room like he is, like we are here.
Sure.
But deeper than that, sometimes a lot of people don't want to pray because they feel that God doesn't want to hear them because of what they've done. And that's what I love about the Lord's Prayer, because it does all of it. And it's so needed.
Absolutely. Last week, you were talking about when you're giving, don't do this in public. Right? Don't shut down the shops and blow the trumpets. Jesus says the same thing towards prayer. Like when you pray, don't be like the hypocrites who go and flaunt it, say all these long things. I read this great book from Spurgeon this summer. It was these short little sermons he would give during their midweek prayer sessions.
Right.
And he's telling people, don't pray for 20 minutes. Nobody wants that, right? Pray for, 30 seconds, 2 minutes, get it off your heart, connect with the Lord, but allow someone else to also participate in this. Talk to to people that feel like prayer has to be this huge performative thing. And why is that actually like the opposite of what God's trying to get us to do?
So I'll do it a different way. If you have a spiritual gift of prayer, you will pray longer.
Sure.
And that's not performative, that just is.
Sure.
And so again, like we talk about here all the time, don't forget the gift tension rule, that is probably what you're called to do. I think the Spurgeon context was in groups.
Yes.
It was a group thing.
Absolutely.
So he was just like, if you're praying, like let other people pray was the idea.
Yeah.
So I think that's important. And I think, again, like I said last week, whether you pray the prayers out of the Bible, or whether you use a liturgy like the Anglican prayer book, which you and I both talked about, that you used, or whether it's free-flowing prayers, it's short or long, Jesus says public or private, just make sure your prayers are connected to trusting God and not trying to prove anything. And I think that's, again, why the Lord's Prayer gives us an outline of how to do it well and thoughtfully.
I think it's interesting that the people that were closest to Jesus, the disciples, are actually asking him, teach us how to do this.
Yes.
Because it is a tool. There's so many different types of prayer. Last week you mentioned Richard Foster's book
on prayer,
all these different types of prayers.
Right.
For someone that is trying to get into prayer, that is trying to memorize scripture, to start building this discipline within their lives, speak to that person. How do you actually just start?
Yeah, so number one, if you're in a group right now and you didn't watch the sermon, please go back.
Yes.
Because I actually think that this prayer in the sermon, the Lord's Prayer, is the way to start. And I remember this is one of my earliest memories of learning the Lord's Prayer. And someone just teaching me the basics of you worship God, you thank God, you ask for your needs, you confess your sins, you forgive other people, and then you ask for protection. Like, that's how I started. And now I'm 50 years old. I've been walking with Jesus for 47 years. I was driving today in my car, and I was listening to the Bible in 1 year, so that's how I do my devotions in the morning in the car, like many of us do. The commute is holy time. It's probably better to do the devotions in the car so we don't sin while we're driving, or we forgive people while we're driving.
Yes.
But then as I was driving, it was like, I listened to the scriptures, and then I literally did that today and prayed for 15 or 20 minutes, a little bit longer but I think that's how you start. I think the gift conversation, whether you have the gift or not, really matters. And then, like I recommended last week, like Richard Foster's book on prayer, or Pete Greig wrote that amazing little book on prayer for normal people. There's tons of resources, but I think as Christians, we should be praying the Lord's Prayer every day. And there have been times where I I've just prayed it. I haven't expanded on it. I just said it.
Yep.
And people are like, oh, careful, that gets ritualistic. But I'm like, you know what, though? Actually, it's sort of like going to the gym. It just works over time.
Sure.
So I try to pray the Lord's Prayer every day, and then I try to expand out of it every day. And I found that is, from the discipline side of it, the best thing every day. Because it covers worship, thankfulness, confession, need, and protection.
Yeah. The last thing I want to talk about is actually the content of our prayers.
Yeah.
When we're praying, the Bible says to pray without ceasing, right? It also says, whatever you ask for in my name, shall become.
In my will.
In my will. But that's the thing we need to talk about is when we grow in our faith, I think naturally our prayers will start to become more aligned with the will of God.
Yes.
But, the Blue Jays just got out of the series. I remember my sister saying, hey, I'm praying that they're going to win the game. And I kind of laughed and said, well, the Dodgers are probably praying that God's going to win, that they're going to win the game.
Many of my friends in LA were praying.
But it's not, I don't think it's wrong to still bring these petitions before the Lord, right? No. Pray in all things. He knows the desires of our hearts.
Correct.
But how do we decipher prayer that is according to God's will and prayer that is just, find me a parking spot, God, please.
Well, actually, I've prayed that too.
Yes.
And actually, He has given me a parking spot. So sometimes it's right. But I think a few things. Number one, the more you know the Scriptures, the more you know God's will. And so, for example, if, there's a lot of churches that really play around with stuff and they promise things they shouldn't, and it's really damaging.
Sure.
But like if you pray 1 Corinthians 13, make me loving, you know it's God's will.
Sure.
If you pray the 10 Commandments and say, God, I'd like to obey these, you know that's God's will. There's a lot of things we know in the Bible that are God's will. But I think the beauty of how Jesus teaches us is your prayers become more God-centric when you start with Him and not you. And I remember sitting in a first-year class on spiritual disciplines in my undergrad, and the teacher said, I want you to worship God and not ask Him for anything. And we all started writing down things, and I realized all of us were already asking Him. That's why the Lord's Prayer is important, because it starts with our Father, not me. So the way we become more biblical is we listen to Him, we look upon Him, we reflect on Him, and then we want to ask Him for things. And God is merciful. We're going to ask for all sorts of things we shouldn't.
Sure.
But starting with God, and Jesus says, remember last week, don't pray like Greeks or Romans, pagans do. Your Father already knows what you need. In other words, prayer is not to panic and draw Him down to see if He'll pay attention. He already's here. It's actually sitting with Him. And just to encourage some of you, you just, as Brandon was referring to before, just sit and talk to Him. Just talk to Him. But I think the Lord's Prayer is the structure for how we talk.
Absolutely. There's so much to go off of that. I mean, we could talk for another hour about prayer, which is great. But friends, God bless you. Enjoy these discussions together. Enjoy praying together. Maybe that's just how you end group this week, just in a simple moment of prayer. John, thank you for your time. Good to be together, and we'll see you next week.